Actually, Wayne, I see you just got here. Did you want to introduce Pat Braden as our speaker?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to turn it over to you. There you go.
Hello, everybody, and Pat. I first actually met Pat when he was a high schooler, so I remember him playing in the Guildie Orchestra, and he's contributed so significantly to this community with his musical gifts. He has a variety of musical styles. The first time I saw a Chapman stick, that was in Pat's hand. Pat has recorded and performed on his Chapman stick, and he has 3 CDs as a singer-songwriter, as a storyteller. I remember very fondly the stories from the cabin. And he has produced 2 one-man shows. He's published a book, Tied from the Fire, and a collection of 6 northern-based fairy tales and fables. Pat has recently produced a website. So without further ado, it's just my great pleasure to welcome Pat Braden to the Rotary Club.
For most of my life, I've sort of been obsessed with going back to probably, arguably, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and just the different musics that were happening. I started out playing big band in high school. So I was playing Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey charts, In the Mood, and all of those things. At the same time, I was playing funk and blues and rock and roll in the bars here in town. And I always sort of thought I was born 10 years too late. I should have been born a baby boomer so that I could have been of age, you know, when at least the 60s hit, and I could have been a part of that sort of musical revolution that was sort of happening around the world. And I sort of picked up a bass guitar in 1977, and I was playing in the bars right away and playing jazz standards and learning a lot about music. Some gigs I would be playing the Handel's Messiah for Roy Mena in one of the churches, and as soon as the gig was over, I'd drop my bass and run across the street to the bar to pick up the electric one and do a bunch of stuff. So within the first 3 or 4 years of me playing music up here, I just had this incredible wealth of knowledge that was happening. And hearing the stories from these players that I was playing with, who were 10 or 15 years older than me, and regaling me with stories about the 1960s and the 1950s and the big band years and all the rest of that stuff. I just got totally jazzed over these stories. And at a certain point in time, I thought, okay, so this was all happening in New York, it was happening in Montreal or Toronto, or in any one of those big major centers, but there must have been equally as rich a musical history that was happening up here. And so that's what got me going to Musicians of the Midnight Sun. So here endeth my preamble. I'll dive right in here. I don't profess to be an ethnomusicologist or anthropologist. And so the earliest musics obviously go back to the indigenous people, the Dene people up here. And I guess my first exposures would have been to the tea dance celebrations and events that would have happened, and the drum dances and the chanting. No highways back in those days, river systems. Richard Lafferty, Wally Firth, all talk about how they would, these boats, the paddle boats would come up, or there would just be, you know, sort of people traveling up and down the river, and they would stop in at the community and they'd pull out their fiddles and have a dance and jamboree or whatever you want to call it. And so those musics were all being transferred to the local people here, not by sheet music, not by reading notes, but totally by ear. Some of the smaller communities didn't have halls, so they would basically talk to somebody, and they would all take turns in opening up their homes. And so a crew of people would come over and clean out all of the furniture, pull out the stove, put a rag up in the stovepipe, and party all night long. And at the end of it, basically the crew would come back, clean it up, put all the furniture back in, and until the next time, right? So different technologies were starting to make it into the north. Reel-to-reel tape recorders, Peter Morris Rafferty, and Brett Simpson. They would do these mock radio programs like they were broadcasting out of Nashville. But one of the guitar players who was really good was Nick Sigiston. And there's a tape that exists of those guys playing, and it's smoking. It's really good. Another major event that sort of happened at that time was the Kecha Hall opened in 1958. Richard Lafferty, Alfred Lockhart, Nick Siviston, and a bunch of others formed a band called the Arctic Ramblers, and played in the time that they were going to school, and they would play out in the community and stuff like that, and they would get paid in Chinese food. At the end of the gig, they would go to the Gold Range and have Chinese food. And really, at that time, the only venues and stuff to play were the Con and Giant Rec Halls, and the Legion and the Elks Halls and clubs and community events. So none of the bars were really bringing in any entertainment that way. We made it all the way to 1960, the Mackenzie Highway opened. Early 1960s at Acacia Hall, which over the next 10 to 12 years became a real sort of nurturing and a growing place for young musicians. So again, 1960s, and I'm sort of part of this crew here as well. The council, the territorial council, and this is pre-GNWT, were recruiting tradespeople up here. And so my dad was one of those tradespeople that got recruited, and they were looking for, again, people like teachers and just sort of professionals and stuff like that. And so there was a number of teachers that, again, through the interviews, caught the ad in the newspaper, went down to the recruiting sort of place wherever it was, and signed an insanely large bonus to be able to come up to Yellowknife and landed here. I think at that time there was a lot of teachers, they can call them old school guys and all the rest of that stuff, but just really common sense guys, and recognize young people and that they need something to do, recognize a talent, encourage that. So maybe they're not academic, they're not going to make it through to grade 12, but they know how to tune up an engine, they know how to fix an board motor, they're really good with their hands and the wood, so it's just like they got these trades. So Richard Lafferty talks about that. A lot of the guys that came in from the communities talk about that too. And I think Will probably kept a lot of young men out of jail just because he gave them some really good things to do. So we get up to 1967, GNWT, Yellowknife's the capital, influx of government employees and the young families. Yellowknife was the capital, and we had 2 gold mines producing in city limits, so there was never any shortage of money. The people that owned the hoist room, another iconic Yellowknife family, Doug and Wilma Finnison, were there, and Doug goes, well, we should record those songs, and Ted goes, well, where are we going to get the money? And Doug says, how much? Just let me know, and I'll pay for the recording. And so they did that, and over the years, next maybe 5 years, they recorded 3 albums. Different people stepped up to the plate, invested in his recordings, and by the end of it, he was selling like 70,000 albums. I think his 3rd album. And earned a Juno nomination for Country Male Vocalist of the Year in 1977. Lost out to the Farmer's Song, Generations, and that's sort of been a big part of what I write about and that I pay attention to. So I mean, musical generations. When you think about Bill Gilday and take a look at his son and his daughter Leela and Jay, they're up tearing up the stages in Southern Canada right now. David Bond from Northern Mexico. I remember when I first started playing a lot of recording sessions, I was playing David's songs, and Jesse picked up on that, and so Diga Wolf, he's cracking about right now. George Mandeville, to Lee Mandeville, Louis Goose, Leanne Goose, Tony Buggins, who played with the Native Cousins out of Port Resolution, his son TJ as well, are incredible players. I made it up to the 1970s, but just a sort of a snippet of some northern history. Please go to Musicians of the Midnight Sun website and check it out. For sure. Thanks so much for the invitation.